I never thought my life would end up like this. An 82-year-old woman bent over a dumpster behind a grocery store, my trembling fingers digging through sticky, sour-smelling trash for something, anything, that could fill my stomach. The cold night air bit into my thin sweater as if punishing me for being foolish enough to survive this long. A blonde strand of my hair, now faded with silver, fell across my face as I leaned closer to the bag of discarded bread. My knees shook not just from weakness but from the humiliation that wrapped around me tighter than the wind. I was alone, broken, and starving. And then I heard a voice. Mary? Oh my God. Mary. I froze. My heart pounded like I'd been caught stealing, though all I held was a moldy half-loaf of bread. Slowly I turned my head. There she was. Margaret Thompson. My old college roommate. The wealthy one. The one whose Christmas cards used to show smiling children on yachts, and who lived a life I only ever dreamed about. She was standing there in her long wool coat, her hair perfectly styled despite the drizzle, staring at me with wide blue eyes. Her manicured hand flew to her mouth. I wanted the earth to open and swallow me. Margaret, I croaked, my voice shaking. The bread slipped from my hands and fell back into the trash bag. Her eyes brimmed with tears as she rushed to me, clutching my shoulders. Mary, what happened to you? Why are you here? I couldn't answer. My throat closed up. Shame poured through me like boiling water. All I could do was cry silently, my breath coming out in little gasps. And that's when everything shifted. She didn't turn away. She didn't look at me like trash. Instead, she pulled me into her arms, right there by the dumpster, as if she didn't care who saw. And in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years, human. But what I didn't know then was that this moment would change everything. That soon I would be living in a beachfront condo worth millions with more money than I ever dreamed of. And that the family who had abandoned me, the same husband and children who let me rot, would come crawling back with crocodile tears, pretending they loved me. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. My name is Mary Whitmore. I was born in a small town in Kansas back when life was simpler. I had blonde hair, blue eyes, and dreams as wide as the prairie sky. I wanted a family, a home filled with laughter and love that could weather storms. And for a while I thought I had it. I married John Whitmore when I was only 22. He was tall, charming, and he promised me the world. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. I cooked, I cleaned, I sewed little dresses and ironed school uniforms. I was the rock, the one who stayed up at night when fevers rose, the one who saved every penny so they could have Christmas presents under the tree. But life has a way of testing how much love really means. By the time I was 60, John no longer looked at me the way he used to. My children were grown with lives of their own. They didn't call much. Didn't visit. When John retired, instead of enjoying our golden years together, he found reasons to criticize me. I wasn't pretty enough anymore. I didn't keep up. I was just old. And then came the worst betrayal. At 78 years old, after more than 5 decades of marriage, my husband told me he was leaving. For a younger woman. Someone who made him feel alive again. My children, they didn't defend me. They said, "Mom, maybe this is for the best. You should let Dad be happy." Just like that, I was discarded. I lost the house. I lost the little savings we had. And worst of all, I lost the people I thought would be there for me. I ended up in a cheap rented room in a rundown part of town, barely surviving on scraps. My pride wouldn't let me beg. But hunger eventually pushed me into the shadows of dumpsters. That's where Margaret found me. She drove me to her mansion that night. I remember sitting in her heated leather car seat, my hands shaking as I clutched the seatbelt. The smell of her perfume filled the air, and I couldn't help but compare it to the stench of garbage still clinging to me. "Mary," she said softly, her eyes flicking toward me as she drove. "You don't have to explain now. Just know that you're safe with me." I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was cry silently, pressing my forehead against the cool window. When we pulled into her driveway, I gasped. Her home overlooked the ocean, its windows glowing warmly against the night. She led me inside, wrapped me in a robe, and ordered her staff to prepare a guest room. I slept on silk sheets that night for the first time in decades. I wept into the pillow because I didn't know how to accept kindness anymore. The next morning, Margaret sat me down at her breakfast table, where sunlight poured through glass walls. She slid a cup of steaming coffee toward me and said, "Mary, I can't undo the pain you've been through. But I can give you a chance to live again." I frowned. Margaret, I can't take charity. She cut me off with a gentle smile. This isn't charity. This is friendship. And then she dropped the bombshell. She told me she had been looking for someone trustworthy, someone she loved like family, to inherit part of her estate. She never married, never had children. And Mary, she said, reaching across the table, I want it to be you. I nearly dropped my cup. Me? Margaret. I can't. But she was serious. Days later, she signed documents transferring me ownership of a beachfront condo in Florida and setting up a trust fund of $15 million in my name. Thought I was dreaming. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. But my joy didn't last long. Because just as I was learning to breathe again, the people who had abandoned me showed up at my door. My husband, my children. With gifts, with flowers, with crocodile tears and rehearsed apologies. They knelt at my feet pretending they cared. But I knew better. They weren't here for me. They were here for what I had. And this time, I wasn't the same woman they threw away. The ocean stretched wide and endless beyond my balcony, waves rolling like God's own lullaby. Every morning I woke to the sound of seagulls and the warmth of sunlight spilling across marble floors. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, drifting in from the gardens below. For once in my 82 years, I didn't wake up with dread sitting heavy on my chest. Instead, I woke with peace. I thought I had escaped them, the people who had broken me. But peace has a way of drawing wolves. It was on a Sunday afternoon when the knock came. I was curled up on a white sofa, sipping tea, the Florida breeze slipping through sheer curtains. At first, I thought it was Margaret. She often stopped by unannounced with pastries or new books. But when I opened the door, my entire body went cold. Standing there, with rehearsed smiles stretched across their faces, was my family. John, my husband, though I never liked calling him that anymore, stood at the front, his hair grayer but his shoulders still broad. He wore a navy jacket, holding a bouquet of roses as if flowers could erase betrayal. Behind him were my children. Claire, my daughter, clutched a gift bag with tissue paper spilling out. Mark and David, my sons, each carried boxes wrapped in silver paper. They all looked well-fed, dressed in crisp clothes, the kind that said their lives had moved on without me. Mom, Claire whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. We've missed you. I couldn't move. For a moment, all I could do was stare. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. John took a step forward, forcing a soft smile. Mary, sweetheart. Please don't slam the door. Just let us explain. My hand twitched on the doorknob. Part of me wanted to slam it shut so hard it shook the frame. But another part, the one still craving answers, still bleeding from years of abandonment, froze. I stepped aside. They entered like actors stepping onto a stage, each of them sighing dramatically, placing gifts on the glass coffee table, as though they had planned every movement. John placed the roses in front of me, clearing his throat. I know I hurt you. We all did. But we're here now. His voice cracked, too perfectly, too rehearsed. Claire dabbed her eyes with a tissue, whispering, Mom, we thought you were gone forever. But when we heard you were alive and well. She let the sentence hang, tears brimming in her eyes like diamonds on command. My stomach twisted. How did they hear? Margaret hadn't told anyone. Unless. I realized then. Money. Word travels fast when money is involved. $15 million. A condo overlooking the ocean. My name was now tied to wealth, not poverty. That's what brought them here. I folded my arms, my voice colder than I thought possible. Why are you really here? The room stilled. Mark, the oldest, forced a chuckle as though my question was absurd. We're here because you're our mother. Because we love you. I laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh that startled even me. Love? When I was eating scraps out of dumpsters, where was your love then? David shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we didn't know, we didn't realize it was that bad. Didn't know. My voice rose, trembling with fury. I called you David. Do you remember? The night I told you I didn't have enough to eat and you said you were too busy to visit. Too busy. He dropped his gaze to the floor. Claire tried again, her voice dripping with syrup. Mom, please. We're here now. Let's not talk about the past. John leaned forward, lowering his voice like he always did when he wanted to manipulate me. Mary, I made mistakes. But I want to make it right. I want us to be a family again. His words, once so powerful over me, now slid off like rain against glass. I stared at them, all of them, and saw strangers. Not my husband. Not my children. Strangers wearing familiar faces. But still, deep inside, something fragile stirred. The part of me that had always longed for family, for forgiveness. The part that remembered bedtime stories, scraped knees, Christmas mornings. And they knew it. They knew I still had that weakness. "Mom," Claire whispered again, stepping forward. "Please. Don't shut us out." I swallowed hard, my throat burning. Why now? After all these years, why now? Silence. And then John answered, his voice too steady. "Because we realized what we lost." But I saw it. The flicker in his eyes, the way he glanced around at the condo, at the chandeliers, at the view of the ocean. He wasn't here for me. None of them were. They were here for what I had. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't too blind to see it. That night, I lay awake in my king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. Their words echoed in my mind, twisting with the sound of waves crashing outside. Could people change? Could they really regret what they'd done? Or was this just another performance, rehearsed until even they believed it? Margaret's words came back to me. "Mary, wealth makes people show who they really are." I had seen who they were when I had nothing. And now I was seeing who they were when I had everything. The contrast was terrifying. I turned on my side, pressing my face into the pillow. My heart wanted to believe them. But my soul knew better. The following morning they were waiting for me in the dining room. They had stayed the night without asking. John was sipping coffee, reading a newspaper as if he still lived here. Claire was arranging flowers in a vase. Mark and David were by the balcony, talking in hushed voices. I cleared my throat. "You're still here." John looked up, smiling warmly. "Of course. We thought we could spend a few days together. Reconnect." "Reconnect," I repeated flatly. Mark stepped forward, his smile strained. "Mom, maybe we can make plans. Family dinners again. Vacations. Just like old times." Old times. The phrase cut me like glass. Old times were filled with silence, neglect, betrayal. But before I could answer, Claire's phone rang. She stepped outside to take the call, her voice sharp, impatient, not the soft tone she had used with me. That's when I realized it. They weren't even trying that hard to hide it. They thought I was weak. That I would fold at the first sign of affection. That my heart was so desperate for love I would hand over everything. But they didn't know. I wasn't the same woman anymore. Later that afternoon, John cornered me in the kitchen. His voice dropped to a whisper, the way he used to when he wanted to bend me to his will. "Mary," he said, placing a hand on my arm. "You've done well for yourself. I'm proud of you. But this kind of money, it's a lot for one person to handle. You need guidance. Protection. And who better than your own husband?" I jerked my arm away, the words spilling from me before I could stop them. "You are not my husband." His face darkened. For a moment I saw the mask slip. The warmth drained from his eyes, replaced with the cold, calculating man I knew too well. "Mary," he hissed, "don't be foolish. Think of the children. Think of the family." Family. The word tasted like poison. I turned my back to him, gripping the counter until my knuckles went white. My chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. I wanted to scream, to throw him out, to lock the doors. But before I could, Claire entered the room, her voice low and urgent. "Dad, stop. Not now." The two of them exchanged a look. One I wasn't meant to see. A look that told me everything. They were working together. And I was the prize. The ocean no longer comforted me. I sat on the balcony in my robe the next morning, watching waves crash against the shore, yet all I could hear were their voices echoing in my head. The false apologies, the strained smiles, the way John's hand had tightened on my arm when he thought I was weak enough to bend. For years I had begged these people for scraps of love. For years I had believed that family was sacred even when they trampled me into the ground. But now, with the salt air filling my lungs, I realized the truth. They hadn't come back because they loved me. They had come back because I had something they wanted. And that made me dangerous to them. That night, unable to sleep, I slipped from my bed and padded barefoot down the hall. The condo was quiet, save for the hum of the ocean outside. I poured myself a glass of water in the kitchen, hoping the stillness would ease my thoughts. Then I heard them. Voices. Low, hushed. Coming from the living room. I crept closer, my heart pounding so loud I feared they would hear it. I stopped just before the doorway, pressing my back against the wall. "We need to move fast," John's voice said, low and sharp. "Before she does something foolish with it." Claire answered, her tone colder than I had ever heard. "I told you, Dad, we can't scare her off. If she feels cornered, she might cut us out. We need her to think we care." Mark sighed heavily. "So what, we keep playing nice? Pretend to love her?" David chuckled. "It's not that hard. She's old. He wants attention. We give her that and eventually she'll hand everything over. People like her can't stand being alone." A chill ran down my spine. They weren't even hiding it. They were plotting, right there in my home, as though I were some naive fool too desperate for affection to see the strings they were pulling. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay quiet, to keep listening. John's voice dropped lower. "I know, Mary. He'll break. He always does. He can't resist me. And when she does, we'll have access to everything. Fondo. The accounts. The millions." I felt something in me snap. I had spent decades being his fool. I had sacrificed my youth, my health, my soul for a man who now spoke about me as if I were a wallet with legs. My children, the ones I carried in my womb, the ones I stayed awake for through endless nights of fevers and tears, now spoke of me like prey. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of fury. I slipped back to my bedroom before they noticed me. Closing the door softly, I leaned against it, my chest heaving. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out right then and there. But I didn't. Because for the first time in my life I realized something. I had power. And if I played this right, I could make them choke on their own greed. The next morning I put on a smile. When I walked into the kitchen, Claire was already there, pretending to be busy arranging breakfast on the counter. "Good morning, Mom," she said, her voice soft and syrupy. "Good morning, sweetheart," I replied, forcing warmth into my tone. Her eyes lit up, relieved. He thought I was buying it. John strolled in moments later, kissing me on the cheek as though decades of betrayal could be erased by a single gesture. "You look beautiful this morning, Mary." Beautiful. At 82, with wrinkles carved deep from years of hardship, he dared to say the word now when it was convenient. I laughed lightly, hiding the bitterness twisting in my stomach. "Thank you, John." They didn't know I had overheard everything. And I planned to keep it that way. Days passed with their act growing thicker. Mark offered to take me out to dinner. David insisted on fixing things around the condo. Claire bought me new dresses, saying I deserved to feel special. John lingered by my side, his voice always low, always persuasive. But beneath their smiles I saw the hunger. Their eyes lingered too long on the safe tucked in my bedroom closet. Their questions always circled back to Margaret, to my finances, to the trust fund. And I played my role, smiling, nodding, pretending I was touched by their sudden devotion. Inside I was burning. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky pink and gold, Margaret called. "Mary," she said, her voice steady but concerned, "are you all right? You sound off." I stepped out onto the balcony, lowering my voice so they couldn't hear. "They're here, Margaret. All of them. John, Claire, the boys. Boys. And what do they want?" I swallowed. "What do you think?" Margaret sighed, the sound heavy with sadness. "You need to be careful. People do terrible things when money's involved. Even family. Even family." The words echoed in my chest like a church bell. I promised her I'd be careful, though my heart trembled with fear. That night something happened that froze the blood in my veins. I had gone to bed early, pretending exhaustion. Hours later I woke to the faint creak of my bedroom door. I stayed still, breathing evenly, pretending to sleep. Through my lashes I saw a shadow slip inside. It was John. He moved quietly, careful not to wake me. His broad shoulders loomed as he stepped toward the closet. He bent down, his fingers brushing against the safe I kept there. My pulse thundered in my ears. He wasn't here for me. He was here for what I had. And he was willing to steal it in the dead of night. I held my breath as John crouched at the foot of my closet, his large hands pressing against the safe. For a moment I thought my heart might burst out of my chest. Every nerve screamed at me to shout, to flick on the lamp and expose him. But I forced myself to stay still, my chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. He muttered under his breath, fiddling with the lock. His fingers shook, not from age but from greed. I knew that shake. I had seen it once before when he gambled away part of our savings years ago. So that's who you are, John, I thought bitterly. Not a husband. Not a father. A thief in the night. After a few minutes he cursed quietly and stood. He lingered at my bedside, his shadow stretching across me. For one terrifying second I thought he might realize I was awake. His hand hovered over me, fingers twitching as though he considered shaking me out of sleep. But then he turned, slipping back into the hallway as quietly as he'd come. When the door clicked shut, I exhaled a shaky breath. My nightgown clung to me with sweat. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. I had two choices. I could confront him in anger, demand answers, throw him out of my home. Or I could play the game. And if there was one thing I had learned in 82 years, it was this. The best revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet, sharp, and unforgettable. The next morning I came down to breakfast as though nothing had happened. John was already at the table, sipping coffee, the newspaper folded neatly in front of him. When he looked up and saw me, he smiled. That same smile that had once charmed me, that had once made me believe he could never hurt me. "Morning, Mary," he said softly. "Morning," I replied, my tone light. I sat across from him, buttering toast with steady hands, though inside my fury still boiled. Claire entered moments later, followed by Mark and David. They all greeted me with syrupy voices, placing kisses on my cheeks, filling my kitchen with false warmth. As I chewed my toast, I looked at each of them one by one. Did they know what John had done last night? Were they all in on it? Or was John acting alone? The thought twisted my stomach. I forced a smile. "I've been thinking," I began slowly, letting my voice tremble just enough to sound fragile. "It's been so long since I've had real family around me. Having you all here again, it means the world to me." Claire's eyes lit up. "Oh, Mom, we feel the same. Don't we, boys?" "Of course," Mark said quickly. "Yeah, it's good to be back," David added, his voice a touch too flat. John reached across the table, placing his hand on mine. "Mary, sweetheart, we want nothing more than to take care of you now. To make up for lost time." His skin felt clammy against mine, and every muscle in my hand screamed to pull away. But I didn't. I let him think I was softening. I let him think he still had power. "Thank you," I whispered, lowering my eyes. "I don't know what I'd do without you." It was a lie. But sometimes, lies are the strongest armor. That afternoon, while they lounged by the pool, I called Margaret. She answered on the second ring. "Mary? Are you safe?" I swallowed, lowering my voice. "He tried to open my safe last night." Silence. Then Margaret's sharp inhale. "John." "Yes." Her voice hardened. "Mary, you can't keep them there. You need to throw them out before they—" "No," I interrupted. "Not yet. Mary, listen to me. I need to do this right," I said firmly, surprising even myself with the steel in my voice. "For once in my life, I won't be the weak one. I won't beg them to love me while they strip me bare. I'll make them show the world who they really are." Margaret was silent for a moment, then sighed. "If you're set on this, at least let me help. I know people. Lawyers. Security." "Not yet," I repeated. "I want them to think I'm still the same Mary they left behind. That's the only way this will work." That night I laid the first stone of my plan. After dinner I casually mentioned that I had been thinking about updating my will. The reaction was instant. Claire nearly choked on her wine. Mark's fork clattered onto his plate. David straightened in his chair, his eyes gleaming. And John's lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile. "Oh, Mary," he said smoothly, "that's very wise of you. At your age. Well, it's good to be prepared." I sipped my tea, keeping my face calm. "Yes. I just want to make sure the right people are taken care of." Their faces betrayed them in an instant. Claire's eyes darted toward the balcony, calculating. Mark leaned forward, eager. David tried to mask his smirk. John squeezed my hand under the table, his grip just a little too tight. "I'll help you," he murmured. I forced a smile. "Of course you will." Later that night, after they went to bed, I sat at my vanity, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My hair, though still blonde, was thinning. My skin sagged with age. My eyes carried decades of tears. But behind the wrinkles, behind the fragile frame, I saw something else. Strength. They thought I was a broken old woman desperate for their love. They had no idea that I had finally found mine. 2 days later, the storm broke. I walked into the living room to find Claire on the phone, her voice sharp and angry. I don't care what it takes, just make sure the account transfers go through. When she saw me, her face drained of color. She hung up quickly, forcing a smile. Oh, Mom. I was just ordering something for you. I tilted my head, my own smile calm, even sweet. Is that so? Her hands fidgeted. Of course. You deserve nice things. I nodded slowly. Yes. I do. Behind me I heard footsteps. John entered the room, followed by Mark and David. They looked between me and Claire, suspicion flickering in their eyes. And in that charged silence I realized something chilling. They weren't just here for me. They were turning on each other. The silence in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Claire stood by the window, her arms folded tightly, her jaw clenched. John paced near the sofa, muttering under his breath. Mark and David sat across from each other, both avoiding eye contact, their bodies rigid like coiled springs. And I, Mary Whitmore, sat quietly in my chair with a cup of tea, watching them like a queen surveying a battlefield. For years they had treated me as the weakest one in the room. The burden. The woman to discard when convenient. Now I saw the truth. They were the weak ones. Because greed is weakness. And I was going to use it to destroy them. It started with a question. A simple, careful question, asked in the most fragile voice I could muster. I was thinking, I said, setting my cup down gently on the saucer. If I were to change my will, how would I even decide who to leave what to? For heads snapped toward me instantly. Their faces were masks of concern, but their eyes glittered with hunger. John cleared his throat first, always the charmer. Mary, sweetheart, that's not something you need to worry about. That's what family is for. We'll help guide you. Guide me, I repeated softly, hiding the bite in my voice. Claire stepped forward, her voice dripping with sweetness. Mom, you've always said I was the one who took care of you the most. Maybe it would make sense for you to, prioritize the one who's been closest. Mark scoffed. Oh, come on. Closest? I'm the oldest. I've carried this family on my back. If anyone deserves it, it's me. David leaned forward, his tone sharp. Please. You've been absent half your life. I'm the one who actually checks in on Mom. That was a lie and we all knew it. But the fact he said it without blinking made me realize how little shame any of them had left. John raised his hand like a referee trying to control a brawl. Stop it. This isn't about who deserves what. This is about what's best for Mary. He turned to me, his face softening in that old familiar manipulation. And Mary, you know I've always put you first. I bit back a laugh. If I hadn't overheard him scheming at midnight, I might have almost believed him. Instead, I gave him a small nod, pretending to be comforted by his words. But inside I was memorizing every crack, every angle, every way to wedge them apart. Over the next week I began my work. It was subtle at first. A whispered comment here. Thoughtful sigh there. A quiet observation that I knew would plant seeds of doubt. At breakfast one morning I leaned close to Claire, lowering my voice as though sharing a secret. Your father told me last night he thinks you're irresponsible with money. He's worried you'd waste it all if I left too much in your hands. Her eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. He said that. I nodded solemnly. He's only thinking of what's best, of course. That afternoon, while walking by the pool with Mark, I let another seed fall. Claire mentioned she was worried about you, Mark. She said you've been reckless with your choices and might not know how to manage wealth properly. He frowned deeply, his fists clenching. She said that. Oh, I'm sure she didn't mean it in a bad way, I replied sweetly, patting his arm. The next day, as David helped me carry groceries from the car, I sighed heavily, letting my voice trail as if the thought had slipped unintentionally. It's hard for me to know who to trust. Claire told me you'd probably just sell everything and disappear if I left you too much. David stopped mid-step, his jaw tightening. She said what? I shook my head quickly. Oh, forget I said anything. You know how sisters are. By the end of the week, the cracks had widened into fissures. Claire snapped at Mark during dinner, accusing him of laziness. Mark fired back, accusing her of manipulation. David rolled his eyes at both of them, muttering that they were children fighting over scraps. John watched it all with growing frustration, his control over them slipping. Exactly as I wanted. But it wasn't just about sowing discord. I also made sure each of them thought they had a special place in my heart. a private confidence that elevated them above the others. To Claire I whispered, "You're the one who reminds me of myself when I was young. That's why I trust you the most." To Mark I said, "You've always been my firstborn. No matter what, you'll always have the largest share of me." To David I confided, "You're the only one who really listens to me. The others, they just talk over me." And to John, in the quiet of the night when he thought I might soften, I whispered, "Maybe I was wrong to ever doubt you. Maybe you really are the only one who still cares." Every word was a lie. But lies, when carefully placed, can move mountains. Meanwhile, I kept in contact with Margaret. "I'm setting the stage," I told her one afternoon over the phone. "You're playing with fire, Mary," she warned. "If they realize what you're doing, they could." "They won't," I interrupted firmly. "They think I'm weak. That's my armor. They'll never see it coming." Margaret sighed heavily, but I could hear the pride in her voice. "Just promise me you'll be careful. I don't want to lose you again." "I promise," I said. But in my heart I knew careful wasn't enough anymore. I had to be ruthless. The turning point came on a stormy evening. Rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the sea. We were gathered in the living room, the tension thick, when John suddenly stood and slammed his glass onto the table. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "All of you fighting like vultures. Don't you see? Mary isn't going to leave anything to you if you keep acting like this." Claire's eyes narrowed. "Oh, and what? She's going to leave it all to you instead?" Mark jumped in, his voice dripping with venom. "That's his plan, isn't it? To charm her just like he always has. To make her forget all the years he abandoned her." John's face darkened. "Watch your mouth." David smirked. "He's not wrong, Dad. We all know you're not here for love. You're here for the money." The room exploded into shouting, accusations flying back and forth like daggers. I sat silently in my chair, hands folded neatly in my lap, watching them destroy each other. And in that moment I realized something incredible. I didn't even need to push anymore. They were tearing themselves apart all on their own. But then John turned, his eyes blazing, and pointed a finger at me. "This is your fault, Mary. You've been playing us against each other." The room went silent. For pairs of eyes turned toward me, suspicion burning in their gaze. My heartbeat quickened, but I forced my face to remain calm. I raised my chin slightly, my voice steady. "And what if I have?" I asked softly. The silence was deafening. Then Claire gasped, Mark's fists clenched, David cursed under his breath, and John's face twisted with rage. For the first time I had dropped the mask. And they knew it. The silence that followed my words was the kind of silence that split a house in two. I had whispered it so softly, "And what if I have?" Yet the effect was thunderous. Claire staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mom, how could you?" Mark shot up from the couch, his fists balled, his voice trembling with rage. "I knew it. You've been twisting everything." David shook his head slowly, disbelief etched across his face. "So all this time you've been toying with us?" "And John?" "Oh, John." His face was crimson, the veins in his neck standing out like ropes. "Mary," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't play games you don't understand." But he was wrong. For the first time in my life I understood perfectly. I took a sip of tea, my hands steady, my eyes calm. "You all came here not for me but for what I have. Don't look so shocked. I only gave you the same poison you poured into me for years." The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder crashing like an angry judge pounding a gavel. And inside, the storm I had unleashed began to break. Mark was the first to snap. He turned on Claire, his voice sharp. "You think you're better than us, don't you? Always trying to play the golden child. You've been whispering in her ear, haven't you? Trying to get everything for yourself." Claire's face twisted, her voice rising. "Don't blame me for your failures, Mark. You've done nothing with your life. At least I was there for Dad." David barked a bitter laugh. "There for Dad? You mean you were Dad's little pet while he ran off on Mom for decades? Don't act like you're a saint." John slammed his fist onto the table, the sound sharp and violent. "Enough," he roared. "All of you shut your mouths." But the damage was done. The room had splintered. I rose slowly, setting my cup down with care. "This is exactly who you are," I said quietly. "Vultures. Fighting over a carcass that isn't even dead yet." Their heads snapped toward me, fury flashing in their eyes. John's jaw tightened. Mary, don't forget yourself. Without me you'd have nothing. No family. No children. Nothing. My voice was calm but my chest burned with decades of suppressed rage. Without you, John, I might have had a life. A happy one. You didn't give me children. You gave me mouths to feed while you broke me piece by piece. His face contorted and for a moment I thought he might strike me. His hand twitched at his side, his body trembling with barely restrained violence. But then Claire stepped between us, her voice trembling with false gentleness. Dad, stop. Mom, she's just upset. She doesn't mean it. Her eyes locked with mine, pleading, but beneath them was calculation. She was shifting again, desperate to regain control. Mom, she whispered, her voice sugar-coated. You don't want this. You don't want us to fight. We're family. We can fix this. I looked at her for a long moment and then I smiled faintly. Family is what you threw away the day you left me in the dark. Her face fell. The storm outside grew louder, rain hammering against the glass doors, the ocean raging just beyond the balcony. Mark turned toward John, his voice bitter. This is your fault. If you hadn't walked out on her, we wouldn't even be here. John's head snapped toward him. You ungrateful brat. David cut in sharply, his voice mocking. Oh please. You're all acting like children. The truth is obvious. Mom's going to leave everything to me. I'm the only one she can trust. That broke the fragile thread holding them together. Mark lunged at David, shoving him hard against the wall. David shoved back, the two of them snarling like rabid dogs. Claire screamed, trying to pull them apart. And John did nothing. He just stood there, his eyes locked on me, fury and calculation warring in his gaze. That night I locked my bedroom door. I sat at my vanity, staring into the mirror at the woman I had become. My hair, still blonde but thin now, fell in wisps around my face. My blue eyes were tired but sharp, sharper than they had ever been. I whispered to my reflection, they don't know who they're dealing with anymore. And then I reached for the phone. Margaret answered on the first ring. Mary? Tell me you're all right. I'm fine, I said, though my voice was tight. But they're cracking. They're fighting among themselves now. Good, she said firmly. That means they'll slip. That means you'll have proof. I hesitated, then whispered, I need more than proof. I need protection. Margaret's voice softened. I'll arrange it. I know a lawyer, one of the best. And I'll get you security. Quiet, discreet but strong. Tears filled my eyes, though I didn't let them fall. Thank you, Margaret. You're the only one who's ever fought for me. No, she said firmly. You're fighting for yourself now. I'm just standing beside you. The next morning I called my family together in the living room. They sat reluctantly, each of them still simmering from the night before. I clasped my hands in my lap and put on a fragile smile. I've decided to start drafting my will. Their heads jerked toward me instantly, every trace of anger swallowed by greed. John leaned forward, his voice soft, almost tender. Mary, that's wonderful. We can all sit together and... No, I interrupted gently. This will be my decision. But I want each of you to write me a letter. A letter telling me why you think you deserve to be included. Honest letters. No performances. They stared at me, shocked. Claire was the first to speak. That's unusual. I smiled faintly. So is being abandoned in old age by the people I raised. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his face red. David muttered something under his breath. John forced a smile. If that's what you want, Mary, we'll do it. Yes, I said softly, that's what I want. That night, when the condo was quiet again, I pulled out a notebook and began writing. Not letters. Plans. Every step I had taken, every lie I had told, every mask they had worn, I wrote it all down. This was no longer just about protecting myself. This was about exposing them. And when the time came, the world would see them for what they really were. But as I slipped the notebook into my drawer, I heard it again, the creak of a door. My heart froze. This time it wasn't John. Through the crack under my door, I saw Claire's shadow moving in the hallway. She was whispering into her phone. I pressed my ear to the wood and caught fragments. Mom won't see it coming. Just make sure the papers are ready. Dad thinks he's in charge, but he won't be. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just scheming with John. She was scheming against him. The shadow of my daughter stretched long against the hallway wall, her voice still hushed but sharp as a knife. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Dad won't even know until it's too late. Once the papers are signed, everything will be ours. My blood chilled. Claire wasn't just greedy. She wasn't just scheming. She was betraying her own father the same way she had betrayed me. And in that moment, something darkly poetic stirred inside me. They were finally beginning to treat each other the way they had treated me. When she ended the call and tiptoed back to her room, I slipped into bed, my heart pounding. But instead of fear, I felt a strange calm. Because now I had a weapon. The next morning I made pancakes. The smell of butter and syrup filled the kitchen, golden sunlight spilling across the counter. It almost looked like an old family breakfast scene from decades ago. Back when I used to wake before dawn to cook for people who never thanked me. But this time I wasn't serving them out of love. This time I was baiting a trap. Good morning, I chirped as Claire walked in, still bleary-eyed, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She blinked at me in surprise. You're cheerful today. Why shouldn't I be? I said with a smile, flipping another pancake onto the stack. My family is here. My children are under one roof again. It almost feels like old times. Her lips twitched, unsure if I was being sincere. Yeah, old times. I slid a plate toward her, my eyes lingering on hers just long enough to make her squirm. She looked down quickly, stabbing her fork into the pancakes as though they were guilty of something. Later that day I found Mark by the balcony, scrolling through his phone with a scowl. Something wrong, dear? I asked gently. He shook his head, but his jaw was tight. Just tired of Claire acting like she's in charge. She thinks she's so much smarter than the rest of us. I tilted my head, letting my voice drop. Well, sometimes smart people outsmart themselves. He looked at me curiously. What's that supposed to mean? I hesitated, then leaned in slightly, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's just say Claire may not be as loyal to your father as she wants you to believe. His eyes widened. What do you mean? I gave him a faint smile. Mark, darling, some things a mother shouldn't say out loud. But sometimes it's better to keep your eyes open. Especially when people are making secret phone calls at night. His face paled. He opened his mouth to speak, but I patted his arm and walked away before he could ask more. Let the seed grow. That evening the tension was already crackling. At dinner, Claire snapped at Mark for chewing too loudly. Mark slammed his fork down, his face red. Why don't you drop the act, Claire? We all know you've been sneaking around making deals behind our backs. Claire froze, her eyes flashing. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Mark sneered. I've seen the way you whisper into your phone like you're the CEO of something. Who are you talking to, huh? David chuckled darkly. Finally someone said it. I thought I was the only one noticing. Claire's face flushed. You two are paranoid. I'm not doing anything. But her voice shook just enough to confirm their suspicions. John slammed his palm on the table, his voice booming. That's enough. Claire, are you betraying this family? For a split second I saw fear flash in her eyes. Then she plastered on a smile. Of course not, Dad. Don't be ridiculous. But the damage was done. They didn't believe her. And I had barely lifted a finger. That night I called Margaret again. They're cracking, Margaret. They're turning on each other. Her voice was grim. That's good, but Mary, you can't just let this fester. The longer they stay in your condo, the more dangerous it becomes. I know, I whispered. That's why I need your lawyer. And your security. Quiet but ready. She exhaled. I'll send someone tomorrow. You'll be protected. For the first time I let my tears fall, hot and silent. I don't even want the money, Margaret. I just wanted love. I just wanted to be seen. I know, she said gently. But sometimes, Mary, love doesn't come from where we expect. Sometimes it comes from ourselves. And right now you're stronger than you've ever been. I wiped my eyes, nodding to no one. He was right. The next day the lawyer arrived. I introduced him to my family in the living room, their faces stiff with forced politeness. He shook hands politely, but I saw the way they eyed him, suspicion dark in their stares. This is Mr. Thompson, I said calmly. He'll be helping me organize my affairs. Affairs? John repeated, his tone sharp. Yes, I said sweetly. My will, my trust, everything. I want to make sure it's all handled properly. The air thickened instantly. Mark's jaw tightened. David shifted in his seat. Claire forced a smile, but her hands fidgeted in her lap. John's face darkened, his control slipping like sand through fingers. "That's not necessary," he snapped. "We can help you with all of that." I looked at him steadily. "No. You can't." The lawyer gave me a reassuring nod before leaving. But the seeds he left behind were enough. That night the house was a war zone. Mark accused Claire of trying to cut them out. Claire accused Mark of plotting with Dad. David accused everyone. John just stood there staring at me with eyes full of rage and fear. Later that night I sat on the balcony wrapped in a blanket listening to the ocean crash. For the first time I wasn't afraid of them. I was in control. But then, a noise. I froze, my heart pounding. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the shadows near the pool. A figure creeping closer to the house. I squinted through the darkness, my breath catching. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't David. It wasn't even John. It was Claire. And in her hand, glinting under the moonlight, was a set of papers. She was sneaking out. The moonlight spilled silver across the balcony tiles, cool against my bare feet. My blanket slipped from my shoulders as I leaned over the railing, eyes locked on the shadowy figure below. Claire moved swiftly, her blonde hair catching the faint glow of the pool lights. In her hand, clutched tightly against her chest, was a bundle of papers. She glanced around nervously before slipping toward the gate at the far end of the property. My chest tightened. She wasn't just sneaking out for a walk. She was running with something. I stood frozen, the waves crashing behind me, the smell of salt sharp in the air. My daughter, the girl I had raised, the child I had sacrificed everything for, was stealing from me under the cover of night. And yet, instead of pain, a strange calm settled over me. Because now I had her. The next morning, the storm inside my home had only worsened. Mark sulked by the kitchen counter, his arms crossed. David muttered angrily to himself on the sofa. John paced the floor like a caged animal, every step vibrating with frustration. And Claire? Claire waltzed in late, her hair freshly brushed, her face the perfect mask of innocence. "Morning," she said brightly, pouring herself a cup of coffee. I studied her carefully, my expression serene. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" Her eyes flicked toward me just for a moment before she plastered on a smile. "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" Why indeed? By noon Margaret's lawyer returned. I had asked him to come quietly, but nothing about his arrival could remain hidden in that house of vultures. He sat with me at the dining table, spreading out documents, explaining terms slowly and carefully. I nodded, pretending to focus, though I could feel their eyes burning holes into my back. When he left, the silence snapped like a whip. John was the first to speak, his voice low and dangerous. "Mary, what are you doing?" I turned to him, folding my hands in my lap. What I should have done a long time ago. Protecting myself. Mark slammed his fist onto the table. "From us. From your own family." "Yes," I said simply. Their faces twisted in fury, their voices rising in chaos, but I no longer trembled. I sat steady as the storm raged around me, my calmness fueling their panic. That night I made my move. I slipped into the hallway quietly, my steps light, my ears straining for sound. When I reached Claire's room, I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Then I pushed it open. Her suitcase lay half-packed on the bed, clothes tossed in carelessly. And there, on the desk, was the bundle of papers I had seen her clutching. I stepped forward, my fingers trembling as I unfolded them. My breath caught. They weren't letters. They weren't harmless. They were forged documents. Drafts of power of attorney forms, trust transfers, property deeds. All in my name. All giving Claire control. The pen marks weren't finished, but the intent was clear. She was preparing to strip me of everything. "Enjoying yourself?" The voice behind me made me whirl around. Claire stood in the doorway, her eyes cold, her lips twisted into a bitter smile. I held the papers tightly, my heart hammering. "What is this?" She stepped inside, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "It's simple, Mom. You can't take care of yourself forever. You need someone responsible to handle things. And who better than me?" "Responsible?" My voice cracked with fury. "You left me when I had nothing. You watched me starve, Claire. And now you call yourself responsible?" She shrugged, her smile widening. "That was then. This is now. Things change." I shook my head slowly, my chest burning. "No. People don't change. They just show you who they've always been. Her smile faltered just for a moment. Then she stepped closer, her eyes hard. Sign them, Mom. Make it easy. Because if you don't, Dad will push harder. Mark and David will fight dirtier. At least with me you'll be safe. Safe. The word was a knife. I pressed the papers against my chest, staring at the daughter I no longer recognized. And I whispered, over my dead body. The following morning the house was louder than ever. Mark and David had overheard fragments of the confrontation. Now they demanded answers. What papers? Mark barked at Claire, his face red. She's lying, Claire snapped, her voice high-pitched. There are no papers. David smirked. So why were you sneaking out with them last night? Claire's head snapped toward him. You're not as clever as you think, David said coolly. I saw you too. The room exploded. Shouts, accusations, denials. And John finally lost his mask. He grabbed the edge of the table, his voice thundering. Enough. This is mine. All of it. She was my wife. She's nothing without me. You think I'll let you squabble over my property like rats? My property. The words pierced me deeper than any knife could. I rose slowly, my hands trembling but my voice clear. Your property? John, I was never your property. And this money, this home, none of it belongs to you. He turned toward me, his eyes blazing. Don't push me, Mary. For the first time I stepped closer, meeting his rage with steady eyes. Or what? You'll hit me? You'll steal from me again? Do it. Show them who you really are. The room went still. For a moment his hand twitched at his side. But he didn't move. Because deep down even John knew the balance had shifted. That evening Margaret arrived with two quiet men, private security. They positioned themselves discreetly near the gates, their presence calm but firm. My family noticed immediately. What is this? Claire demanded, her voice sharp. Protection, I said simply. John sneered. From us. You've lost your mind, Mary. I looked at him, my eyes cold. No. I've finally found it. That night the storm inside the house boiled over. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling when the shouting began. Claire accused John of manipulation. John accused Claire of treachery. Mark and David accused everyone. The voices rose higher and higher until I heard the sound of something shattering. Then silence. And then a scream. Piercing, sharp, filled with rage. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering. Because I knew that scream. It was Claire. The scream tore through the condo like glass shattering against stone. I leapt from my bed, my legs trembling, my heart pounding in my ears. The sound of Claire's voice, piercing, guttural, almost feral, echoed down the hallway. I snatched my robe from the chair and hurried toward the noise. When I entered the living room, chaos greeted me. Claire was standing near the fireplace, her hair wild, her face streaked with tears and fury. In her hand she clutched the forged documents, the ones I had seen in her suitcase. They were crumpled now, edges torn as if ripped in a desperate fight. Across from her, Mark stood with his chest heaving, his fists clenched. David loomed just behind him, his lip bleeding, his eyes blazing. John sat slumped in the armchair, his jaw tight, his hand gripping the armrest like he might break it in two. The storm outside raged, lightning flashing against the glass walls, thunder rolling through the night. But inside the storm was worse. You stole them. Claire shrieked at Mark, waving the papers. You went through my things. Mark's face twisted. I didn't steal anything. You're the one trying to cheat us all. Don't pretend you're innocent. David spat blood onto the floor, his voice low and venomous. She's been planning this for weeks. I told you she was sneaking around. None of you believed me. Claire turned on him, her eyes blazing. Oh, shut up, David. You'd sell Mom's ashes for pocket change if you could. Don't act like you're better. Better than you? David snarled. At least I don't stab my own father in the back. John finally snapped, his voice roaring above the thunder. Enough. All of you. But Claire spun toward him, her voice dripping with scorn. Don't you dare talk about enough, Dad. This is all your fault. You abandoned Mom. You taught us this is how family works. You broke us long before I ever picked up a pen. Her words cracked the air like a whip. For the first time John didn't have a comeback. He stared at her, his face pale, his jaw clenched. and I, standing in the doorway, felt both a sting of truth and a strange, bitter satisfaction. She wasn't wrong. He had broken us. But they had chosen to follow his path. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Look at yourselves," I said softly. "Screaming. Bleeding. Tearing each other apart like wild dogs." They froze, their eyes snapping toward me. I walked slowly to the center of the room, the lightning illuminating my face. "You call yourselves my family. But family doesn't plot behind closed doors. Family doesn't sneak into bedrooms at night. Family doesn't forge signatures to steal from their own mother." Claire's grip tightened on the papers, her lip trembling. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his fists loosening. David's eyes flickered with shame for just a moment before hardening again. John rose from his chair, his voice low and trembling with rage. "Mary, stop this. Stop turning them against me." I turned toward him, my chin lifting. "I don't have to turn them against you, John. You did that all by yourself." The room erupted again. Claire lunged at Mark, shoving the papers against his chest. "You'll never get them." Mark shoved her back, his voice cracking. "They're worthless. Mom will never sign them." David grabbed Claire's arm, yanking her away. "Give them to me." She screamed, thrashing, the papers tearing further in their struggle. John strode forward, his hand raised as though to strike, his voice booming. "Stop it, all of you. Those belong to me." And that was when it hit me. Not once had he said they belonged to Mary. Not once had he acknowledged me as the rightful owner of anything. To him I was still just an object. A vessel. A prize to be claimed. "Enough." I shouted, my voice slicing through the storm. They all froze mid-battle, their breaths ragged, their eyes wild. I stepped into the center of the room, snatching the torn papers from Claire's trembling hands. I held them high, then let them fall slowly into the flames of the fireplace. The fire caught quickly, the edges curling, the ink blistering into smoke. Their gasps filled the room. "You fools," I whispered. "Fighting over lies." The flames crackled, devouring every false signature, every greedy word. And in that moment I felt stronger than I had in years. But strength doesn't come without consequences. Mark suddenly pointed at Claire, his voice trembling with fury. "You tried to cut us out. Admit it." Claire shook her head violently. "I was protecting Mom. Dad was going to take everything." John roared, his face purple. "Liar. You've always been selfish. You think I don't see it." David laughed bitterly, his voice sharp. "You're all liars. Every one of you. And Mom knows it now." He turned to me, his eyes burning. "You're not leaving us anything, are you?" The question hung heavy in the air. My silence was enough. His face twisted in rage. "All this time, you've just been stringing us along. Making us beg like dogs." I met his fury with calm. "I wanted you to show me who you really are. And you have." They erupted again, shouts, accusations, threats. But this time I didn't tremble. Because I knew the end was coming. I had already called Margaret's lawyer. I had already prepared the documents, the real ones. My wealth was secured, protected. No signature of mine could be forged, no trust fund touched. And tomorrow morning the final step of my plan would be in motion. I sat back, watching them unravel, their greed consuming them whole. But then, a crash. Glass shattered across the floor as Mark hurled a vase in fury. Claire screamed. David shoved him back. John roared, his fists raised. And suddenly the chaos wasn't just shouting. It was violence. The guards Margaret had arranged burst in, separating them before blood was spilled. The children shouted, John cursed, but the guards stood firm, their presence like iron. "Mrs. Whitmore," one of them said to me, his voice steady, "do you want them removed from the property?" I froze. The words were heavy, almost unreal. Did I want them gone? For decades I had begged for their presence. I had cried in empty rooms, prayed for phone calls, wished for love. And now here they were. And I had the power to cast them out. I looked at them, my husband, my children. Their faces twisted by greed, their bodies bruised from fighting one another. I opened my mouth to answer. But before I could, John lunged forward, his voice a guttural growl. "Don't you dare, Mary. If you throw us out, you'll regret it." The guards pinned him back, but his words pierced the room. And in that instant I knew, this wasn't over. Not yet. John's threat still echoed in my ears. If you throw us out, you'll regret it. The guards held him firmly, his face contorted with rage, spit flying from his mouth as he struggled against their grip. My sons stood frozen, their eyes darting between me and him, unsure whether to intervene. Claire pressed herself against the wall, her face pale, her hands trembling. Me. I stood in the center of it all, calm, steady, watching as the house of lies they had built finally crumbled around them. For years they had controlled me with fear. But now for the first time the fear was gone. Because I held all the cards. The guards looked at me again. Mrs. Whitmore, do you want them removed? I opened my mouth, but my voice caught in my throat. I looked at them. John, the man who had abandoned me. Mark, my angry eldest who thought entitlement was love. David, my youngest, who wore selfishness like a second skin. And Claire, my daughter, whose betrayal stung deepest of all. They were mine. My family. My blood. And yet, they were strangers. Strangers who had left me to starve. Strangers who had come crawling back only when I had something worth taking. I closed my eyes, tears welling. Then I whispered, not yet. The guards nodded, releasing John carefully but remaining at the edges of the room. The air thickened, heavy with unspoken words. John straightened, his breath ragged, his eyes blazing at me with barely restrained fury. You think you can control me, Mary? You think you can embarrass me in front of these hired dogs? I lifted my chin. I don't need to embarrass you, John. You've done that yourself. The next morning I gathered them in the living room. The storm had passed outside, the ocean calm again, the sky washed in pale sunlight. But inside the tension was worse than ever. They sat stiffly on the couches, their faces drawn, their eyes wary. I stood at the head of the room, a stack of papers in my hand. The real papers. This, I said softly, holding them up, is my final decision. Their heads snapped toward me, eyes wide, breaths quickening. You've spent weeks fighting, scheming, lying, I continued. You've shown me exactly who you are. And because of that, my choice is clear. Claire leaned forward, her voice trembling. Mom, please don't do this. We can change. I can change. Mark's fists tightened. We're your children. You can't cut us out. David scoffed. She won't. She's bluffing. John's lips twisted into a sneer. You've always been weak, Mary. You don't have it in you. I looked at each of them, my eyes burning. Then I said clear and firm, you get nothing. The silence was deafening. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark shouted, his voice breaking. David cursed loudly, his face twisted in disbelief. John laughed. A bitter, cruel laugh that filled the room like poison. Nothing? You think you can just erase us? You think you can give everything to strangers? To that rich friend of yours? I held his gaze. Yes. His laughter cut off, his face darkening like a storm cloud. You'll regret this, Mary. I swear you'll regret this. The guards stepped forward instantly, their hands ready. But I raised mine. No. Let him speak. I turned to him fully, my voice sharp as glass. For 50 years I lived in your shadow. I cooked your meals, bore your children, carried your burdens. And when I was no longer young enough, pretty enough, useful enough, you threw me away like trash. You left me to rot. But I survived. And now I am not your property. I am not your victim. And I am not your wife. Not anymore. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but my voice stayed strong. This is my justice. This is my freedom. Mark stood suddenly, his face red, his voice cracking. You can't do this, Mom. We're your children. We have a right. You have no right, I cut in. Not to me. Not to my home. Not to my life. You gave that up when you abandoned me. David shook his head, disbelief painted across his face. All this, after everything we've been through, you just erase us? I looked at him sadly. You erased yourselves. Long before I ever made this choice. Claire sobbed, falling to her knees. Mom, please. I didn't mean it. The papers, the lies, I was scared. I thought if I didn't act first, Dad would take everything. I was just trying to survive. Her tears tore at my heart. For a moment, the mother in me wanted to rush to her, to cradle her in my arms. But then I remembered the dumpster. The cold bread in my hand. The silence of my phone when I begged her to call. And my heart hardened again. I survived without you, I whispered. And I'll keep surviving without you. The guard stepped forward. Mrs. Whitmore, one of them said gently, do you want us to escort them out? This time I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said firmly. All of them. The room erupted, shouts, curses, pleas. Mark slammed his fist against the wall. David stormed toward me only to be stopped by a guard. Claire sobbed uncontrollably, reaching out as though her tears could erase years of abandonment. John stood silent. His face pale, his eyes burning into me with hatred so sharp it felt like a knife. You'll die alone, he hissed finally, his voice trembling. And no one will care. I looked at him steadily, my voice quiet but strong. I'd rather die alone than live another day chained to you. The guards led them out one by one. Their voices echoed down the hall. Mark shouting threats, David cursing, Claire begging through sobs. John walked last, his head held high, his eyes never leaving mine. And then silence. The door closed. The house was empty. For the first time in decades, I was free. I sank onto the sofa, my body trembling, my tears finally spilling. My heart ached with grief, with loss, with a mother's sorrow for what her family had become. But beneath it all there was peace. As I had chosen myself. For once I wasn't the same woman they had thrown away. I was stronger. Days later I stood on the balcony with Margaret at my side. The ocean stretched endlessly before us, the sun warm against my face. They'll never forgive you, she said softly. I smiled faintly, the wind tugging at my hair. I don't need their forgiveness. I needed mine. She slipped her arm through mine. And now you have it. I nodded slowly, tears stinging my eyes. Yes. Now I have it. The waves rolled on, steady and endless, as if the ocean itself whispered the truth. I had lost my family. But I had found myself. And that was worth everything.